first thing I want to start with is the framework in which we think through how we look at this. Reach is what everyone knows. This is what the majority of us are capable and enabled to measure pretty easily and pretty quickly. I realize I'm looking up at the screen, so I need to be looking here. What we are able and capable of measuring pretty quickly. It's what we have access to on our own without additional systems and support. So how many and what type of people are engaged with our projects and our work, whether it's our onboarding program, our leadership programs, our advanced technical training, or upskilling. So this is, 10 people attended, 30 people waitlisted, these people from this department, these people of this demographic. This is what we know, and it's pretty straightforward. And this is a lot of what executives initially reach for and grab. But beyond that, what do we need to know is how well are we doing with them? And this is what we use to improve our work. This is what we use to improve our day-to-day business. And how do we know that we're doing well and a good job for these people? So are they actually learning? Is the program we delivered any good? Are they actually learning what we are teaching them? Are they satisfied with it? Is it useful to them? And so sometimes we will creep into CSAT. We get those smile sheets. Did you enjoy it? Was it applicable? We get a lot of reaction out of this. And then impact. This is where we really want. This is what we're reaching for and striving for most of the time, is are they actually able to apply that in their work day to day? Is it converting into anything? Is it useful to them back out in the work field? Is it useful to them when they leave our locus of control, when they leave our classrooms, when they leave the training? If it's harassment training, is it actually useful to them? Or was it just, I raced through that training as quickly as I could, because I'm guilty of that myself? And the value, and I really want to separate impact out from values. Why do we do this in the first place? Why do we care? What's the point of all of this? So is it driving velocity, productivity, efficiency, revenue? Why do we care that people can even apply these skills in the first place? Why is the business investing in L&D or in this work to begin with? Why do we care that people onboard faster and get more productive sooner? Because we want to get back to work. So that's the framework. But how do we actually make this something useful and tangible? That's what I want to get through in this webinar. So first we actually have to break down what we're teaching them or what we're trying to achieve in our learning and development into a skill. So skill is a learnable, observable, and measurable behavior. So it can be learnable. Shutting an oven door, it's not something that you can improve on. It's not something that gets better. So it can be acquired through training, practice, and experience. And it can be observable. It's not something that is just knowable. If I see a skill or a learning objective that just says, understand this, they can understand this concept, I'm going to scream. It doesn't help me measure anything anymore. And it's measurable. Ability to perform the behavior can be objectively evaluated on an appropriate proficiency scale. Now, this gobbledygook, this is hard to understand and comprehend. So I always like to think about scrambling eggs. Scrambling eggs may entail deciding how many eggs to buy, buying the eggs, cracking the eggs, mixing the egg yolk and the egg whites, cooking the eggs, and then serving the eggs. Because those are judgment skills, actually performance skills, and doing all of those. Because deciding how many eggs to buy, you have to read the recipe and know how many eggs to buy based on how many people you're serving. Are you doing a buffet lunch for 500 people? Are you just doing brunch for you and your partner? So that's something that we can actually measure whether or not you exercise the right kind of judgment based on the circumstances of the situation. And also, who are you serving? Are you serving a vegan brunch? Did you buy the right kind of eggs for your audience? Or are you buying for you and your partner who held these certain ethical values? So you bought the free range, cage-free eggs. So knowing that and knowing the right combination shows whether or not you actually evaluated your circumstances and bought the right kind of eggs. And then cracking the eggs, did you get the shell into the eggs? And is that something that you improved on? So skills you need to be very specific. And we talk about verbing the noun when you define a skill. And it's a verb-noun pair. So some examples, the ability to build a treehouse, dance the foxtrot, play chess. Or if you're getting into incredibly advanced skills, create a pivot table, prioritize a bug queue, categorize books using the Dewey Decimal System, or empathize with the user. We can talk about very vague skills which feel hard to measure. But if we get specific about it and we can generate the scenario around it, we can get specific into things like leadership and collaboration and inclusion skills that we can get specific about the specific behaviors around there. So here's a little example. We looked at new hire onboarding. What do we actually want new hires to do? Some of the skills might be explain how the team operates. A new hire should be able to explain how the team operates, explain the corporate structure, define the company mission and values, identify sources for common questions and answers, troubleshoot basic problems independently. At that point, they are independent and working productively. They don't need to come to me for every single thing. Contribute to a starter project without supervision, and prepare your working environment and tools. That's what I want a new hire to do. Those are the skills a new hire should have. So that's what we want out of a new hire. But really, what questions do we have about our new hire onboarding? Because the most serious mistakes are made not as a result of the wrong answers, but that we never asked the right question in the first place. I deviated from the quote here, pardon me. But we never ask the right question in the first place. It's asking the wrong question. It's where we kind of go off the rails, to begin with. So what do we say as a group? We try evaluating a puppy's health because we find that people's instinct is to jump to a survey. I've taken a survey. I know what a survey is like, and I can write a survey. I can write a survey about my course that I just designed. But really, we want to start with the big, hairy question that isn't answered by one single metric. It can start with, to what extent, and my example used to be about my own health, but the AI systems stopped letting me generate humans, so I had to switch to puppies instead. So don't look at these puppies too close in the eyes. They will start to creep you out because these are AI-generated dogs. So I think a lot of people, if they were trying to understand the puppy's health, they would go, let's generate a survey and go rate the dog's health on a scale of 1 to 5. But that's not my true question. That's not what I'm really trying to understand. I'm trying to understand, to what extent is this dog healthy? That's going to take a big constellation, a big confluence of things to help me answer that question. So just like that, for a learning program, it might be, how many users have signed up for this manager communities program I have? That's the survey question. That's answered by one thing. How many users? 5. Does that mean my program is good or bad? I don't know. Is 5 good or 5 bad? The real question is, to what extent are the manager programs reaching the right audiences? Because I want it to be the managers that need it. So that's my real evaluation question. And differentiating that is hard. So another one might be, to what extent is the inclusion program influencing the sales act or to act more inclusively? That's what I'm really trying to do, not answer, is a sales or an inclusive environment? So there's a little bit of nuance here, and I'm trying to dig into that. So in Powtoon, one example that was shared with me was the Nespresso team's onboarding program. So they got a lot of feedback, and some of the feedback they got was like, the future training need to expand coffee knowledge. It needs to be more streamlined, consistent, and clear. My best onboarding experience included meeting colleagues across channels. So like hearing that, some of their questions across these different dimensions would be, to what extent is the new hire onboarding program reaching the right learners? Is it that we can bypass transfers? Is it that we can bypass people who used to work at Nespresso and then came back? So we want to make sure that we're really answering that we're reaching the right people. And about the quality, is it that we're providing relevant education? If we spend 6 hours on how to sign up for your health insurance, is that really the right and relevant education at that time? To what extent have learners grown their skills as a result of this onboarding? Because if they spent all this time and they walked away confused and they actually didn't grow and learn, that was a bad quality onboarding program. And then to what extent have learners applied their skills as a result of that onboarding? Let's say they walk out and they feel good and they feel confident, but they go back to their desk and they're like, whoosh, it was all gone. Can't remember it. Again, no impact. It didn't actually stick. And the value is, to what extent is new hire onboarding helping them get more productive faster? Let's say we had a lecture-based onboarding and it took them 6 weeks to get to productivity, but then we switched to a project-based one and it took them only 3 weeks to get to productivity. We are making money and we're getting them to productivity faster than before, and that was driving business value. So we have our big questions, but how do we start measuring it? The way we think about that is not just asking the right questions, but asking it in the right way. So we have to think about decomposing that into skills and behaviors. And I think I'm going to confess, it was a TikTok that, and I'm like almost 40 on TikTok, but it was a TikTok that really broke it down because it was a doctor who was talking about a story about asking a woman, do you have trouble swallowing? And the woman was like, no, I'm fine. It's no big deal. But she'd been swallowing that way her whole life. So instead of asking her, do you have trouble swallowing? It's about the specific behaviors that he needed to ask her about. He's like, when you eat, like when you eat a chicken nugget, are you dipping it in sauce every single time so that it goes down easier? Are you coughing a lot? When you eat, are you constantly drinking water as you eat to make it easier to swallow? So what's the specific behavior of difficulty swallowing, rather than just asking her, hey, do you have difficulty swallowing? Because she's been swallowing that way her whole life. So think about the specific behavior demonstration associated with that we want to see. So thinking again about our dog example with our creepy puppy here, to what extent is our dog healthy? What would be the specific behaviors to help us answer that question that we would look for? It's not just, oh, the doggy's weight, but is there a weight fluctuation that we would see that would help us suddenly be alarmed and see whether or not that dog is healthy or not? If they are a normally very happy and playful dog and their energy level dropped and changed, so energy level changes, appetite level changes, urine output changes. So what is the behavior that we would associate with answering that question that we would expect to see? So to what extent are management programs reaching the right audiences? First, we have to define what the right audience is and then go, okay, those targeted managers are actually doing the act of opening our email announcements and clicking on the banners and signing up and waitlisting. Gosh, this seems really obvious, but we actually had to take the time to document and write this down. Because if we didn't, what are we doing? They're not dropping out. They're completing. They're clicking on the supporting resources. So they went through the course and there were additional resources. Did they actually click on and follow up on the supporting resources? Are they recommending it to other managers? And are they sharing those supporting resources? This is a lot of work. And is the program influencing the sales org to act more inclusively? So now we're starting to go, okay, the people who attended the program, do they feel more included? Are they giving the others in a meeting, the opportunity to listen by protecting their opportunities to speak up more often? So that's the specific behavior of inclusive meeting attendance. Oh, Jane, I heard you, Bob was about to speak up and he was interrupted. Can we return to Bob's point? Users are providing attribution more inclusively. Oh, Tim was the one who originally brought up that idea, and Jane helped him create that. Are we attributing things more inclusively? Are we encouraging points of view that disagree with them to speak up in meetings? Oh, Amy, did research in that field. Amy might have an interesting point here. So are we actually welcoming more inclusion here? So going back to our new hire onboarding, what are the behaviors that help us answer those specific questions? So learners who are in their first 15 days are automatically enrolled in their program. So are people using the opt-out process, or are they actually using the automatic enrollment? Learners who had an exception outside the first 15 days are actively enrolled by their manager. So what are the specific actions we're looking at? Learners and managers rate the content as relevant to their work. So now we're starting to see, okay, what are the specific behaviors? Learners utilize the troubleshooting tools versus going to their, to the neighbor, hey, can you help me with this? Or can someone answer this question for me? Or just sitting there and freaking out and not knowing what to do, or asking their manager. They're actually utilizing the troubleshooting tools provided. Learners complete the tutorial steps. They're actually doing what we want them to do. Learners rely on teammates less to solve simple problems. Learners can engage more meaningfully in the discussions and projects. And learners who onboard in their first 15 days are more likely to be productive than learners who opted out and had to delay their onboarding process. They're actually more productive faster. That's what we want to see. Now, okay, we have the behaviors. Great. Like we took the time to document it. What's the point? The metrics are the countable numbers associated with those behaviors that would show up in the report. So, like I said, weight fluctuation, that was a behavior. The actual metric is their weight over time. That's the actual number of LBs. Energy rating over time, their food usage and consumptions. So how do we convert that to an actual number that we would put in a spreadsheet? Their depression score, their white blood cell count, their cholesterol levels, their blood pressure. And the same thing, it was the same concept. Now we're just converting it to what the actual number is. For the manager programs, it's the penetration rate, the email open rate, the banner click-through rate. So you're seeing how this actually builds into an end-to-end strategy that is logical and useful versus jumping right to the end. And for the inclusive behavior, the inclusion sentiment of participants in the program versus non-participants. The number of interruptions before and after the program intervention, number of documents with percentage of documents with attribution, who is this document attributed to versus not, and the behavior attribution before and after. So now you have a baseline of comparison that you can show a time split or a control group and an experiment group so that you can effectively go, this program was the change maker. You have attribution back to your program. And so now you can see the indicators start to fill out. Is percentage of new. This is the number that you would actually put in a report and generate a dashboard from.
Just one question on that, Nikki, to jump in. Sorry. A question's come in on this, and the question is, how many indicators are too many? I know that can mean, how long is a piece of string, but like, is there a minimum amount? Obviously, you'd want as many indicators as metrics as possible, but you've got to think about who's actually going to give you that many indicators, right? So is there like a sweet spot? What do you think on that?
I think that you cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So you start with the ones that you have access to, the ones that are actually effective in making your case and are useful. So if you try to collect all the indicators, you're going to drive yourself mad. You cannot boil the ocean. So use the ones that are actually going to be useful. I would start with just at least one or two in each dimension, and then you see what is compelling and useful to your stakeholders. You are the experts in your fields and your domains, and knowing what is actually useful for your leadership. If your leadership only cares about revenue, make sure that you're focusing and prioritizing your time around revenue, and then work back, because I would say these indicators and metrics are useful for different things. I really like to separate out. There's a big difference in the metrics that are useful for me to do my job as an instructional designer to improve the quality of my programs versus the ones that are for communication, for stakeholder management. That's a separate set of numbers, a separate set of metrics, and they serve a different purpose, and that's okay. I think a lot of people feel like they have to have all the metrics and they have to be the same numbers for the same things. So really separating out communication from improvement, and that can feel a little slimy sometimes, but you have to understand that executive presence is different and it serves a different purpose. So
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, perfect.
I'm going to return and then we can have a further discussion about that. So we're going to talk about instruments, because I feel like a lot of people will try to jump here. I need to go get this number from my IT team. I need to go to the survey. I need to go do these things. And I need to start here. I need to go start collecting my instruments. When it's the very last piece, if you just start collecting your instruments, then you don't know why you're writing these surveys. You don't know what you're collecting these metrics for. And then you try to kind of back into a strategy. And really, a strategy has to be purposeful. And or if I don't have if I don't have the right, instruments, then what's the point? Or I won't have a good strategy and it won't be useful. So I really, again, I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of progress or the good. So, to what extent is my dog healthy? Now that I know why I need these things, I can say I need a scale. I need to develop an energy rubric, to say what is good energy, what is normal energy versus too excitable versus lethargic. A food tracker. I need to come up with a depression survey and rubric. I need to create I need to get a blood test. I need a blood pressure cuff. I don't want to start poking doggies and pulling their blood if I don't know why I'm doing it. And then, for this one, I need to go into, I need to define my target audience, and I need to, define that. I need to, these are Google specific tools, but like my email marketing tool, I need to get into my banner card metrics. I need to develop and make some, methods user study. I'm starting to get into cross-functional teams here. I don't want to start bothering my UX team or my, email marketing team for data if I don't know why I'm collecting it and what specific parts of it am I collecting. Same thing with this one. I need to now develop a meeting interruption tracker. At Google, it started off with literally handouts of sheets where I just would leave them in the room, where it would go like, plus 1 point for every time a meeting interruption was redirected back positively, negative 1 point if it wasn't. And we would just collect the data on that. And we could go, oh, wow, after this training, people started being more mindful of how the meetings were being conducted, doing that. And it was just a sheet of paper that we would leave in rooms as handouts and doing all of that. We distributed a document template that literally had a box that goes, make sure you list all your references and whose other documents that you used as supporting documentation, so that people were aware of who you were referencing and doing all of that. So knowing what instrumentation you need to develop versus trying to develop it and not knowing why you were developing it. So here, I now know I need to do a pre and post assessment. I need to do a manager survey, but it hits on multiple dimensions. I need to know that I need to interact with our HR API and our learning data warehouse and all those things. And at what point and for what reason, rather than leveraging my relationships without a lot of knowledge. So if you look into Powtoon, like this gets exported into YouTube or Vimeo or your LMS because you are investing your time and energy into creating these videos, and you want to make sure the time and energy that you're investing in this is being useful. So you know, here they're using it for onboarding, and they are importing into an LMS. They need to know what their view time is, and so they need to make sure that they're hooking it up into the right places. And this can guide them into knowing what to measure at what point. So ultimately, this is a big expectation management exercise because I love Brene Brown. And my interpretation of some of the things that I've read from her is that disappointment often arises when your expectations don't match your outcomes. And your expectations are like a movie that play in your brain. But the problem is expectations can go unexplored and unexpressed. You didn't realize that you had a movie playing in your brain. Neither did your stakeholders or your partners. They all have movies in their brains too. And often our role, and the reason we go through this thing, this whole exercise, is to go, oh, wow, I had a movie. Does my movie match your movie? What is your movie? And our role is to help them explore what that movie is. They didn't realize it. So help them go figure out what that movie is. What do you mean when you say quality? What do you mean when you say impact and value? And so help them explore that. And or if they do know what it is, they're not telling you. How can I meet your expectation to avoid disappointment if you're not telling me? So this is a way for all of us just to get on the same page when it comes to all of that. So I know it feels like a lot of work, but what I have found in my experiences, we're already doing all this work. We're getting a little bit of, we're paying a 2-cent tax here and a 50-cent tax here and a 30-cent tax there. And it's a tiny little bit of damage we're taking throughout the lifetime of our project. When we're getting asked these questions to justify our work or to explain what we're doing is in this constrained market, we're getting asked, how do we know what we're doing is working? And people are curious about how do we retain talent instead of recruit talent and doing all of these things. So trying to understand the impact, and we're doing this work in tiny bits along the way. And what I'm finding now is actually consolidating it all together at once up front to do a concerted strategy is actually less overall work. It's just exposing it together all at once up front instead of this like secret intellectual labor we're doing behind the scenes in tiny little bits of 1,000 paper cuts over time. So it feels like a lot of work, and it can feel very obvious because we're doing tiny bits of it over time. But I think being intentional about it up front can show the vast amounts of very hard work that our groups are doing to be intentional with an evaluation strategy. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to have a really thorough discussion, but I feel like this is a lot of information that is really hard to take in all at once. And that's why I really want to leave space for questions throughout all of this and really try to make it as practical and tangible for everyone as possible.
Amazing. Thanks, Nikki. I'm just good. Before we jump into the questions, I've got quite a lot I'm facilitating in different screens, but I'm going to launch a poll really quickly for everyone. That should be in front of you. But I'll kick things off, Nikki, if you are ready to go. So hopefully no one says no on that one. But a question that came up, I think you kind of you've answered that throughout, but a question is from Tom. He says, are L&D or yeah, the learning L&D teams equipped to measure success on their own to what the C-level need slash require, or do we need help from other departments? In brackets, this can be daunting slash difficult.
I really think so. Google seems like this like really big, huge company that has like all the resources. Google has all the money and all the resources. And I will tell you, that is all bullshit. It feels like it from the outside, but L&D at Google has had to be incredibly scrappy. And we don't have one big L&D company. We have lots and lots of small little L&D companies, and we're forced to be incredibly scrappy. So we don't get a lot of support sometimes, and we really embrace the spirit of like figuring it out on your own and you have to prove yourself. So a lot of these things was done by spreadsheets, by little tools, and very small like pilots. We're going to run a small pilot with this many people, justify it, get a little bit of information that it's incrementally better than the last iteration, and then justify it before they will invest any additional resources, give you maybe a little bit of time with an engineer to help you answer this bit of information, and make small improvements on that. That's why I said you can do this with a little bit of a survey and get a little bit of insight, that it's a little bit better. And then the next one is, okay, you are now getting access into, performance data. Maybe it's not, their core, their annual performance review rating. But like in a sales organization, they have to, this is going to date me. When I worked in customer service, I think I'm 38. So over 20 years ago, we would Y-cord. So, you get on board, you do your training, and then when you get your first calls, you would Y-cord with your trainer and they would listen in on your calls. They're already doing that, but that was to know whether or not you were, doing performance management, and they would check in on you every once in a while. Well, why can't the L&D team get access to that information and how your manager is rating you? So that if the L&D team, worked cross-functionally with the management team to go, hey, let's develop a standardized rubric, and then we can go, oh, the people who attended our trainings also were getting higher ratings from their manager here. There's a little bit of a correlation. And so it can be very scrappy in terms of, we're doing tables and spreadsheets and hand correlating. And then as you start to show there's value in doing this evaluation, you're going to get more support. You're going to get lended more credence into how this is doing that. And because of that, it took me 5 years of doing, first it was just myself, then I got a temp, and then I got, a temp data analyst. And then I grew it to an entire department at Google over time because I saw the value of understanding this information and this data. And that's at Google. We're a data-driven company before they invested in data for an L&D team like this. So I think you can start very scrappy with what information you have available to you.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. I think that answers another question that came in. So Ryan said, starting from scratch, what tools slash personnel do you need to be successful in measuring success? I think, well, the proof was in the pudding that it was just you to start with at Google. So if Google can start with one person and some spreadsheets, I'm sure everyone else can as well. So moving on to another question.
Yeah.
So Olivia's written in, she said, how do you collect, in brackets, real honest answers from employees who don't want to give feedback slash fill in surveys? An example of this is our frontline workers.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing, is developing a relationship where you can feel like you're getting actual data. And I think sometimes you have to come at it a little bit sideways and think about how you're asking the question. I think this is where I have a little bit of an advantage, where this comes from my background, is I know how to ask these questions and how to do it safely. you make it clear and you be incredibly transparent what this information is being used for and how it's being used. I made the mistake of emailing 9,000 Google employees, and I used a mass mailer, and I was like, um, about who have previously attended one of our machine learning courses. And I was like, hey guys, and it's like, hey Max, and I changed up the name. This this is Nikki. I'm, on the machine learning education team. We're trying to improve, we're trying to change this specific thing about this specific course and doing it this specific way. Can you help me by telling me what you thought about this thing and making it incredibly personal? The data is only going to these people and it's only going to be using these things. And I will once it's done, I'm going to happily share the results with you. It's going to, and you tell them exactly what it is. And I forgot to change the reply to email. And so everyone who finished the email replied to me like, oh, happy to, Nikki. I did it. I gave you your feedback. And I received 4,000 emails back saying yep, filled out your information, Nikki, because it came from me. And they were happy to help me as an individual because they knew what I was asking, why I was asking for it, and what it was being used for. Because there was no pretense of retaliation. They knew that I was using it to help me do my job, and they were willing to help me as a person. It wasn't nameless, faceless L&D team, or there was any worry that it would go back to their manager. So it was very clear, and I was able to show them hey, I took this information. 50% of you said this thing was way too long. Based on that, we actually broke into 2 courses. Based on it, they knew I was actually doing something with this information. So it really was about acting in good faith.
Amazing. Thank you. And there, I've got loads of questions to go through. So I'm just sieving through. We're going to go right back to the beginning of your presentation. So this question is, the framework that you presented, is this a black and white for all organizations, or does it have to be customized depending on the industry, who they're training, for example?
I have tried to make it as generic as possible so that is applicable to any organization, because it is impact is impact. Are we doing a good job? That's within our control. When they are in our programs, whether it is a hands-on program, whether it's a mentorship program. So we aren't even involved in delivering it. We're just providing the scaffolding, and we have a mentor and a mentee, and all we did was connect them. What was the quality of that? So whatever, and it's not even really related to L&D. And this took into account a multitude of other frameworks combined to result in this. And we work with I'm not going to name the management consulting company. We work with a management consulting company, we work with internal people. And then the impact is, okay, once they're out of our control and we set those baby birds out into the world, could they utilize this information on their own without our guidance, without our help? Is this useful? And then value really is about for the business. Why have an L&D team? Why have us exist at all? Because these people are going to be salespeople without our intervention, without our sales support, without our sales L&D, or without our mentorship. They're going to do it. They're going to find a way. But why are we the change makers? If we existed, was this going to have more productivity? Was it going to have more revenue or not? And how do we start to show that we were the change makers in having it be more revenue or less revenue? And all the data shows, and I have a separate presentation on the impact and value of L&D organizations and DEI teams, and how there is a multiplying factor in having this. And so what is the value of doing this? And why does the business care? Because there are companies who do not have L&D. They don't invest in it. They outsource it completely. Here, you have an L&D budget. Go do your continuing education elsewhere. Why have it inside? So that is about the bottom line versus could they apply it? And so this I try to keep as generic as non-tech. I've delivered this talk at multiple companies and other things in different sectors. And I always come back to this framework. So feel free to customize it. Feel free to label it different ways as, you know, as it works for your company and your stakeholders. Again, you're the experts, so you might use different words in your individual company.
Yeah, perfect. I think it depends, on a multitude of different factors, right? So how many people potentially in your L&D team, if you're regional, international, etc. So yeah, use the framework here, and yeah, use it to the best of your ability. I have another question from Anonymous, which is a great name here, but it's more specific into retail actually. And the
Yes.
question is, how can we measure the impact of our retail training on market KPIs? So a few examples are conversion rate, average transaction value, and unit per transaction. Very specific, this one.
Yeah. So I would say you have to be specific about the behavior of your training to build that funnel towards your conversion or to what you are looking to demonstrate. So if you're saying that you want them to do an upsell, if you want the behavior to, for your person to do an upsell, you have to start to build that conversion. So that funnel. So when you have people, and I'm a big believer in pilots, so a control group versus an experiment group. You run your control group of a sample size of similarly grouped people. They don't have access to the training for some period, and they will get access. I'm not talking about doing any, ethical harms here, but, so some people don't have access to the training, and some people do. And the behavior that you are trying to have them perform is they do an upsell, they do a soft sell, they do something. And then that group is exhibiting that specific behavior. And then you are tracking that specific group of impact and value metrics. And oh, that group had a higher rate than the group who didn't. And so you can track them for a pilot duration. And then, great, once you feel a satisfactory difference and you feel a level of confidence, then you can then roll out your training to everybody. So that's why you don't have to keep track of all these metrics for every population forever. You can do it till you feel you have confidence in making a decision, and then you can move forward. So that's why I want to differentiate, like in doing these questions, it's when do you need to ask these questions? These questions aren't necessarily in perpetuity. Sometimes you have this question for a specific period in time. Sometimes this question is only asked by an executive. Sometimes these are questions you ask yourself to improve yourself. So that's why in this framework, it's, the quality questions are sometimes just for you. Sometimes the quality question isn't what the executive is focusing on. Sometimes the executive is only focusing on, you have to really, that's why I want a lot of time invested in the question section rather than, the behaviors and the metrics section. That is an output of really investing good energy into knowing yourself and knowing the questions you're asking and when you're asking them.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers your question, Anonymous. I think we've got time for two more questions, so I'm just going to fire them at you, Nikki. If you have any questions after, just please send them our way and we can get them answered to you. But this one it says, we are a survey heavy organization, which I'm sure a lot of organizations are, as we are remote first. How do we shift and in what format should we be asking the real questions to get the indicators/metrics we need?
I find Google used to be a very survey heavy organization as well. I have stepped back from doing that myself. That I only ask the questions when you have a question. Only do a survey when you have a specific thing to answer, and being strategic about how you ask the survey. I find that a lot of people love a good Likert on a scale of 1 to 5, blah, 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 blah. That's actually from a psychometric perspective. I hate that. It's my own personal soapbox. I'll step onto it. I like a labeled, this is a free secret hack I'll give you all. If you have to ask a question, I like it labeled. So a pre-assessment question I'll do is like, um, rate your ability to do the specific skill. And so I don't know where to start. I could do it with some help, someone watching over me and doing some help. I could read some documentation or read a manual and figure it out. Oh, I know this so well, I could do it from memory. And I know this so well, I could teach someone else how to do it. So I ask that question beforehand, I ask it afterwards, and then I ask it 6 months later. And what I see is from the beginning, I expect them to not have any knowledge. And then afterwards, poof, confidence is high. And then 6 months later, confidence drops. But I call that the reality check. And then if I ask it again 6 months later, confidence comes back up. And that's what I anticipate. But I ask them that, I ask their manager that, and then I actually monitor their ability, their actual demonstration of that skill. And I triangulate that data together. And I see, oh, wow, if their confidence is really high to do it, but they're not actually demonstrating it, did we do something wrong? Did we pump up their confidence, but they can't actually do it? Or vice versa? Or why does their manager think that they can't do it, but they actually are doing it? So it lets me answer a couple of questions. But I only ask that question when I'm actually tweaking or working on that specific skill. So really going back, only asking the questions when I'm actually needing an answer about the question and going, because if I'm not looking at that data, but I'm just collecting it for collecting's sake, that's going to lead to survey fatigue. And then all the other questions, I like to ask just thumbs up or thumbs down, because that can lead to actually higher survey response if the survey feels fast. And also a few questions. We ask at Google, we ask 1 or 2 questions every week to get a pulse, and then we move on. But that really keeping it as light as possible and finding other hooks into answering the question, other opportunities for observation or other things. So really being strategic when you are surveying and the way in which you survey, making it as frictionless as possible. I think is the way. I would share that we use a tool. Qualtrics has one as well. We use an internal tool where you can answer it right within the email. You don't even have to leave the email to answer the survey question.
Amazing. Okay, we've got time for one more question. We're about to run out of time. It's kind of a big question, so you can answer this as long as short as you want. But someone's asked, as we're in this time of year, we're in Q4, right? New Year's upon us, scarily. But what is Nikki's trend/trends for 2025?
I think my trends, I work a lot in AI. And so I think my trends is going to be a movement towards pre-training AI and a movement towards having to justify and answering really difficultly, why are you doing this? So having to do a lot more with a lot less. And that's really scary. I don't like this myself. I have reduced headcount. I'm having to bring on temps and vendors. I'm having to very intelligently use my tools and really having to justify myself. And so really having to answer, why am I doing this? And how is this aligned to the strategy? So being very smart about how I influence my stakeholders in doing that. So that is making me nervous, but I'm using this as an opportunity to be strategic and going, really be ruthless and efficient with my time. And so having to justify it as a pilot, as something I'm testing and really investing in, okay, this is essential to business strategy, and having to reframe core essential business products, things that were taken for granted. I think having to align that to larger business strategy, getting savvy with how I communicate is something that I'm really going to have to figure out in 2025.
Yeah, I think that rings true to a lots of different industries, even outside L&D, doing more with less for sure. Particularly with marketing as well. Amazing.
Mhm.
So that kind of brings us to the end, I guess, end of the hour as well. So what I want to do, yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, whether you are on Zoom, YouTube, or watching it in a pub or a bar, I'm not sure. But also a huge thank you to Nikki for joining us today. You can see the links below if you want to contact Nikki direct. Any other questions you have, because we couldn't answer them all, we'll get back to you directly. But I want to wish you all a great day, evening, morning, depending where you are in the world. And thanks again, Nikki.
Cheers, folks.